go. On the Fan, New York Sports Radio. Mike's on, Mike's on. He'll get you the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the Fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM, WFAN.
From the studios of WFAN, this is Mike's on Francesa on the Fan on this Thursday, December 7th, a day that will live in infamy, as we all know. But one of our countdown days as we continue now, we are dwindling down to a precious few. We have 7 shows left. If you count the Sunday show, we have 8. We'll be at Mulcahy's Sunday with our Football Sunday show, but we have another busy show for you today. Among our guests will be David Stern, the longtime, incredibly successful commissioner of the NBA will join us. So that's one of the special guests through the 30 years has been David Stern, and we welcome him back to the program today. He'll join us later on. Do some football with Brian Billick as we begin the football week this week with a very important Thursday night game and really a absolute, without any question, must win for the Atlanta Falcons. We've talked about highlight games with the Falcons so many times this year. So many times we've talked about games that would, show certain things or say certain things about them, and they have failed most of these tests this year at 7-5. Now their season is on the brink. Today against the Saints, they don't win this game, they're not going to the playoffs. They still have another game in New Orleans. They still have a close with Carolina. So they face a very tough schedule coming off the loss to Minnesota. Their chance of winning the division virtually nil now. And they are going to have to probably, at least go 3-1 to have any chance to get in. At least go 10-6, and I'm not sure 10-6 they could lose a wild card. Lose a tiebreaker, or they could get beat out. Anything is possible at 10-6. To make sure that they go, they'd have to go 11-5. That's the way it's going to shake out in the NFC. Where if you look, and that's why people are making such a big deal about Aaron Rodgers coming back after this week. It doesn't matter. The Packers are not going to go to the playoffs anyway. The Packers are 6-6. They're not going to get there. If they run the table, they might have a chance to break a tiebreaker. Maybe, and maybe not. They've already got losses to Atlanta. They got losses that really hurt them. So, I don't even think it's possible. Most likely won't even be possible then. So, and the same thing for the Cowboys. They come here this week thinking they run the table. Maybe they have a chance, and maybe they do. But that's the remote chance because these teams don't break ties. Cowboys don't break a tie with Atlanta. Green Bay doesn't break a tie with Atlanta. Atlanta has tiebreakers over both of them. So that's why Atlanta at 10-6 is a much more formidable opponent than most because they have wins over those teams. And that's the thing that will help them the most. So we begin it tonight, and, we'll find out. The Saints are still thinking division titles. They're still thinking home field. They're thinking things they should be thinking right now. But that will start tonight. And see where it goes from there. The amazing thing about Atlanta, that's why 10-6 is so good. The 3 teams they're probably going to have to deal with, Green Bay, they have a tiebreaker on. Seattle, they have a tiebreaker on. Dallas, they have a tiebreaker on. So from that standpoint, that is big. That is really big for them. So they could actually even afford a loss and get in probably at 10-6 because they have tiebreakers over all those teams at 10-6. So, but it's going to take 3 out of 4 for them to have any chance. And they have lost so many games where they were, in the end trying to make a run or within the score or just or blew a lead. And now they have the Saints at Tampa, at New Orleans, and then home against Carolina. Not really of the contending teams, by far the most difficult schedule. And that's where they are as this week begins for real. And a very interesting week. Even the Giant game, which at 2-10, it's hard to find reasons for excitement. This one has a lot more than it would because the Cowboys come in off that win against Washington at 6-6, hoping they can run the table, which will include a trip to Oakland, home game with Seattle, and then a game at Philly, which now it looks like there's a very good chance Philly would need that game the last week of the season for home field. So that schedule Dallas plays is brutal. And running it is going to be virtually impossible. I mean, that's just too hard to do. At Oakland, Seattle, and then at Philly. And now Philly, the odds on them needing the game in some way for a 2 seed, for a maybe even a 1 seed, depends, that one is right there. So you can expect them. Another big game this week, Minnesota, again, coming off last week's big game in Carolina. And this one, again, has major, major home field implications. If the Vikings get this one, then Cincinnati at home, at Green Bay, home Chicago, and they could wind up being the 1 seed and then have an express train right into their own building for a Super Bowl. But that's what's left for them after a big game at Carolina this week. And the Vikings right now. And then, of course, the Eagles and the Rams this week, a very big game there. Because, first of all, you're going to learn something about the Eagles, who lost last week in Seattle, stayed out on the West Coast, and now get the Rams this week. They haven't had the hardest of schedules. We know that. They haven't beaten a lot of good teams, but they've romped a lot of teams that were in between. And now this week, it's 10-2 Philly at 9-3 the Rams. We learn a lot about the young quarterbacks and a lot about the young teams and where they go from here. They have the Rams this week. They have the Giants next week. They have Oakland, and then they have Dallas at home. That's their schedule. And the Rams thinking about a 1 seed, thinking about a 2 seed, stuff like that with their schedule. Remember, the Rams already lost to Minnesota. That's why this is so big. They don't break a tie with Minnesota. They have Philly. Then they have at Seattle, at Tennessee, and a home game against San Francisco, which becomes a more dangerous opponent with Garoppolo at quarterback. Remember, he has yet to lose a game in his 3 starts in the NFL, including last week when he drove the Niners to beat the Bears. So that's where they are. So 3 very, very critical games this week. New Orleans at Atlanta tonight. Minnesota at Carolina on Sunday. And then the Eagles at the Rams also on Sunday. Baltimore at Pitt on Sunday night. Pitt back on into prime time. The Ravens playing better. Now they get Pittsburgh. And then Monday night, the Pats without Gronkowski into Miami. The only thing about that, and this is before the Pats don't ever look ahead. Even though they have the Steelers next week, they never look ahead. And this game feels like a walkover. Remember one thing, this is the one building where Tom Brady, through his career, has struggled, is in Miami. It's the one place he's had these befuddling losses and these befuddling poor games. So we'll see what happens there in that one. But some interesting games there, as we gave you, especially in the NFC this week, starting tonight with the Falcons and the Saints in action. So the Giants try to see if they can get something done and build up Spags' resume. Eli Manning back at quarterback this week, add some enthusiasm to the game. Maybe that stopped the onslaught of tickets going from the Giant fans to the Cowboys, although the Cowboys are going to be incredibly represented at the game this week. The Jets try to continue their winning ways against a Denver team that has absolutely completely collapsed. I mean, it is unbelievable how badly the Broncos, a team that has far better talent. I mean, just on the defensive side, the Broncos have just utterly collapsed as a team. It has really just completely come apart for them. And right now, the Jets are the better team. Never easy to win there. And the Jets on the road, being even the slightest of favorites is highly unusual. But when you look at what's gone on here for the Broncos, I mean, they lose by 13 at home to the Giants. They lose by 21 to the Chargers. They lose by 10 to the Chiefs. They get blown out by 28 by the Eagles. They lose by 25 to the Pats. They lose to the lose to the Bengals. They lose to the Raiders. And then they get blown out by the Dolphins. I mean, they haven't won a game since the 1st of October. They have been just absolutely awful. Last week getting beat by a bad team, 35-9. And right now the Jets are a far more cohesive team. Not an easy place to win, but a far more cohesive team than the Broncos are right now. So we begin the NFL week. We'll have Billick later. We have Stern. We got a lot of other stuff to do. As we count down the days, we have stuff to give away. We have net tickets to give away. We have the Classic to give away at Citi Field. Plus we have I believe, the last set of Paley Center tickets to give away, which will be a week from today at the Paley Center. My second to last show, which will be next Thursday at the Museum of TV and Radio, which is now called the Paley Center on 52nd Street. We'll give you a chance to win tickets there throughout the afternoon. So we'll get it all rolling right after this.